I'm announcing today that on July 15th and the 15th of every month thereafter throughout the year, you will get deposited in your bank account half of your tax cut, at least $250 per child each month, a direct deposit into your account. So if you're a working family with 2 kids, you're going to get $500 a month into your bank account on the 15th of every month starting July. And no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a single penny in federal taxes because of it. I just want you to know.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Are you kidding me? What an honor this is. This is an incredible honor. And it's amazing. Indian of descent Americans are taking over the country. You, my vice president, my speechwriter, Vinay, I tell you what, but thank you. You guys are incredible. Did you want to say something? I'll be quiet.
Law yet. Let me just finish. I'm gonna let you talk. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna let you talk, okay? He does not need a visit to the border to know what a mess was left by the last administration. That's his view.
Does that count as a visit? He said, I've been there before. You're saying he drove by for a few minutes. Does that count?
What is the root cause? Where are people coming from who are coming to the border, Peter?
The president said that
I'm asking you a question because I think people should understand the context.
No,
where do people
I'm asking you, why did President Biden say he has been to the border?
Do you have plans to visit the southern border?
I've been there before, and I haven't. I mean, I know it well. I guess I should go down, but the whole point of it is I haven't had a whole hell of a lot of time to get down. I'm going to take one more question, and then
Mr. President, can I follow up on paid leave, Mr. President? Sir, may I follow up on paid leave?
Mr. President, Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger said of your presidency this week, nobody elected him to be FDR, they elected him to be normal and stop the chaos. How do you view your mandate after Tuesday's election losses for Democrats, and is she wrong?
I'm going to get in real trouble. This is the last question I'm taking. You can decide who I'm pointing to.
I expect to see the impact of the infrastructure bill. And when do you think the Build Back Better bill will be passed? By Thanksgiving, Christmas?
I don't want to make your job easier. I don't want to give you, I know the answer exactly when it's going to be passed. And I know exactly how it's going to.
The impact from this bill.
Well, they'll see the effects of the bill.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident in change behavior. What do you do all the time? So, when did I say I was confident? What I said was, let's get this straight. I said what will change their behavior is that the rest of the world reacts to them and they diminish their standing in the world. I'm not confident in anything. I'm just stating the fact.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks, he downplayed human rights abuses, he even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin framed it?
I understand that.
It's a
My last question and apology. I shouldn't have been such a wise guy with the last answer I gave. Look, to be a good reporter, you got to be negative. You got to have a negative view of life. Okay, it seems to me the way you never ask a positive question. Why, in fact, having agreement? We'll find out. We have an agreement to work on a major arms control agreement.
What was your role as vice president in charge of policy in Ukraine and your son's job in Ukraine? How is that not a conflict of interest?
It's not a conflict of interest. There's been no indication of any conflict of interest from Ukraine or anywhere else. Period. I'm not going to respond to that. Let's focus on the problem. Focus on this man, what he's doing that no president has ever done. No president. I'll take your questions, and as usual, folks, they gave me a list of the people I'm going to call on. So, Jonathan, Associated Press. And I'm told, Jonathan, I'm supposed to recognize you first. I'm sorry, I'm going to get in trouble with staff if I don't do this the right way. Jennifer Jacobs, Bloomberg. I'm going to get in trouble with my staff. Yeah, go ahead, but I pretend that you didn't answer you. Which one of the 12 I've had?
Pelosi, Schumer, the crew. Infrastructure, sir, and in particular.
You guys are bad. I'm not supposed to be answering all these questions. I'm supposed to leave, but I can't resist your questions. I came. By the way, I have to admit, If I didn't have these positions, I'd be sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom rather than the president's bedroom. But it really, it really is how.
You can sit down. I don't want you to stand through. Joe, pay attention.
I keep forgetting I'm president. When I was 14 years old.
In a weekend interview, Vladimir Putin laughed at the suggestion that you had called him a killer. And if Ronald Reagan said trust but verify, what do you say to Vladimir Putin?
To answer the first question, I'm laughing too. They actually, well, look, I mean, he has made clear that the answer is, I believe he is in the past. The hard nucleus around the Navy forms in times of war. You're a really dull class. I mean, come on, man. Is the sun getting to you? I would think you'd have an opportunity when I say that about the Navy to clap, but being here together. And this bill is fiscally responsible. That's a fancy way of saying it's fully paid for. It doesn't raise the deficit by a single penny. And it actually reduces the deficit, according to the leading economist in this country, over the long term. And keep my campaign commitment, it does not raise a single penny in tax for anyone making less than $400,000 a year. Say it again. Folks, no matter what they tell you, you're going to find out. This will not affect your taxes one little bit in having to pay a penny more. Again, the press is here. The poor people have to follow me all the time. They've heard me say this a lot. We got out of the blue a couple weeks ago a letter from 17 Nobel Prize winners in economics. And they determined that it will ease inflationary pressures, not create them, ease them. Ease those pressures. And finally, Infrastructure Week. I'm so happy to say that, Infrastructure Week. And all along, you've told me I can't do any of it anyway. From the very beginning. No, come on, be honest, okay? You didn't believe we could do any of it. And I don't blame you, because you look at the facts, you wonder, how's this going to get done? But I think there's a dawning on the part of a lot of people, hold elective office. But I feel confident that we will have enough votes to pass the Build Back Better plan.
Mr. President. What gives you that confidence?
Me.
If you were forced to scrub paid.
Well, look, all kidding aside, I believe everybody in the process is entitled to be treated with respect. I haven't seen any one of you explain supply chain very well. No, I'm not being critical. I'm being deadly earnest. When your editor says, explain the supply chain, okay? Lots of luck in your senior years, my coach used to say. But I sincerely mean it. This is a confusing time. Confusing time. And by the way, everybody internationally uses Build Back Better now. When I used the phrase initially, people looked at me like, Build Back Better. Well, what it means, we're the only country in the world gone through a crisis, that goes through a crisis and come out better than we were before the crisis occurred. That's building back better than it was before. We first came to office. And a lot of this has to do with this lady right here, the vice president. It's not all me. I used to stand there and have to listen to the president. She's got to stand there and listen to the president, but she deserves an enormous amount of the credit. But here's what the deal. Oh, I know. I think it'll be this spring. I think we'll be able to do that this spring. I feel confident that By summer, we're going to be well on our way to heading toward herd immunity. No nation has ever done anything like it in all of history. Only the United States had the capacity and the will and ability to do it, and we did it today. The extraordinary success of this mission, my predecessor, the former president, signed an agreement with the Taliban to remove U.S. troops by May the 1st, just months after I was inaugurated. I take responsibility for the decision. Now some say we should have started mass evacuation sooner. And couldn't this have been done in a more orderly manner? I respectfully disagree.
Is the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. It is not inevitable.
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion. But the likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. We'll not conduct a hasty rush to the exit. We'll do it responsibly, deliberately, and safely. And we will do it in full coordination with our allies and partners. The bottom line, 90% of Americans in Afghanistan who wanted to leave were able to leave.
A couple of your stations you found some empty shelves. They're old empty shelves, but it doesn't matter. But go back and take a look at some of those shelves again, okay? At this point in the year, we're looking at the sharpest one-year decline in unemployment ever. Simply put, America's back to work, and our jobs recovery is going very strong. Today's historic drop in unemployment rate includes dramatic improvements for workers who have often seen higher wages and higher levels of unemployment. They are receiving higher wages. Wages are up, especially for hardworking Americans, often ignored in the past and past recoveries. Tax cuts and raising wages for middle-class families mean that Americans, on average, have more in their pockets today than they did each month since we've been in office than they did last year after accounting for inflation. Let me repeat that. Even after accounting for rising prices, the typical American family has more money in their pockets than they did last year. Once again, no one making less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes. My Build Back Better plan is fiscally responsible. It's the first major piece of legislation in more than a decade that's not only fully paid for, but will generate more than $100 billion in deficit reduction this decade. Signing a bill, since the end of October, the average weekly price of gasoline in partnership with with private business and labor retailers, the two busiest ports in America, to meet consumer demand for the holidays. Now, I said that yesterday, and then I saw we need to cut costs to take care of. Today's news means that unemployment rate has now fallen by more than 2 percentage points since I took office. That's the fastest decline in a single year on record. And it's about 3 times faster than any other president in their first year in office. 17 Nobel Prize winners in economics have written a letter to me affirming that this bill would reduce long-term inflationary pressures in the economy. And 2 of the leading rating agencies, not liberal think tanks, 2 of the leading rating agencies on Wall Street confirmed this month that my plan will not add to inflationary pressures.
First of all, Mr. President,
the government's going to cover 100% of the cost. 100% of the cost for the first 30 days for all the emergency work, from clearing everything to every single cost the federal government's going to take care of. And it includes debris removal, cost of overtime and law enforcement, emergency service personnel, and shelter. And that'll get you through. And by the way, I want to thank your wife. she started a toy drive for this part of the state to make sure, how many, come here, I'm taking credit for something I have nothing to do with.
How could you?
But tell them what you got so far.
Well, as of this morning, we think that we have around 20,000 gifts donated, and we've got 3 more days to go.
20,000 gifts, so no kid's going to go to sleep wherever they get to sleep tonight without a gift. God love you. You're going to rebuild. You're going to be stronger than you were before. We're going to build back better than it was. And when I come back, I got one beautiful lady and her husband promised me a meal. She's apparently a hell of a cook, so I'm coming back for the meal. So, 12 years old.
What's her name?
Ray's favorite command coin. I told him, you give command coins to battlefield commanders. This is the battlefield. Ray Hall, right? So much area has burned this year because of weather and climate changes that is larger than the entire state of New Jersey. The entire state of New Jersey. That's how much land has been burned to the ground. So we got a lot to do. We got a lot to do, but the American people are ready to do it. This is the United States of America. There's not a darn thing we can't do. Thank you. I have to admit to you, I have one serious regret. And we talked about this, Jill and I, and so did we talk with the Vice President and the First Gentleman. I had hoped by now each one of you who have helped us get to where we are would have had full access to the White House. I mean that sincerely. We had all kinds of plans. We thought we were going to be in a position because of the change. We hoped if people had moved on to getting all their vaccines, we would have been in a position to change the way in which this takes place. But next year and this year before it's over, in the White House. It's all paid for. And nobody making less than $400,000 a year will pay one single penny more for anything in taxes.
What do you say to people in the Dayton area, Mr. President, who have expressed concerns about whether trillions more in federal spending will help when you have inflation at a near 40-year high?
The way I say to them, this is not going to cost a single solitary penny. We're not going to increase the deficit by 1 cent in the Build Back Better plan at all.
Did Senator Manchin break his commitment to you? When you announced the framework, the White House says that all 50 senators were believed to get behind it, all 50 Democratic senators. So did Senator Manchin break his commitment to you?
Senator Manchin and I are going to get something done. Thank you. I was saying to a couple of younger members of my staff before I came over, about the many times I've been to Israel, I said, and then all of a sudden I realized, God, you're getting old, Biden. I have known every prime minister well since Golda Meir, including Golda Meir. And in the 6-Day War, I had an opportunity to, she invited me to come over because I was going to be the liaison between she and the Egyptians about Suez and so on and so forth. I used to drive a tractor trailer.
Oh, awesome.
And so I know a little bit about driving big trucks.
No, that's great.
But anyway, I only did it for part of a summer.
Oh, okay.
But I got my license. People in the middle class, when I ran for president, I said I was running for 3 reasons. One, to restore the soul of the country, to restore some decency to how we dealt with that. I've never known a time when the middle class has done well that the very wealthy haven't done very, very well. I'm not being solicitous. I'm being deadly earnest. But I'm tired of this trickle-down economy. I'm tired of it. Lowering the cost of child care, elder care, housing, health care, prescription drugs, and meeting the moment of climate change. That's what this plan does. Frankly, I'm surprised that not a single Republican in Congress has joined us in supporting it. It can't be because it would add to inflation. 17 Nobel laureates, 17, 3 weeks ago spontaneously sent me a letter saying that it would have the opposite effect. It would actually reduce long-term inflationary pressures. It can't be because it would add to the deficit, because it reduces the deficit over the long term. It can't be because it's fiscally responsible, because it's fully paid for. Fully paid for. No one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a single penny more in federal taxes. 55%. This bill will deliver universal preschool to every 3- and 4-year-old in America. Look, this Build Back Better plan is also going to ensure that parents can afford child care. And the child care work, if you're paying $14,000 for child care like a lot of Minnesota families do, My Build Back Better plan is going to make a giant difference in your life, because your child care costs will be capped at 7% of your income. 7%. The first major piece of legislation in more than a decade that's not only fully paid for, based on official estimates from the Congressional Budget Office, the Joint Committee on Taxation, the Treasury Department, it's going to generate more than $100 billion in deficit reduction this decade. So look, I know some people have said this bill isn't fiscally responsible enough, because even though it's fully paid for, they acknowledge, even though it would reduce the deficit, which they acknowledge, even though it represents the first time in over a decade that we're doing the hard work of offsetting investments with new revenue, after years of Republican leadership in Washington, passing tax giveaways to the super wealthy, new spending without even giving a thought about how to pay for it, they added $8 trillion to the national debt with the Trump tax cut. $8 trillion. I welcome a serious conversation about how to pay for the investments we make. But here is what those critics are not telling you. They're not telling you that I've committed to paying for every single program that extended, if any are, in future legislation, whether that's for a day or a decade. And here's what else they're not telling you. No parent should have to do what many had to do last semester, and that is sit in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant so their children could use the internet to get their homework done. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. Everybody talks about the price tag for this legislation. $1.75 billion. It will not cost the taxpayers a penny. If you're making less than $400,000 a year, you're not going to have your taxes go up one single penny, not a cent. And guess what else? It also means that there is no increase to your taxes, and people are going to just pay a fair share. And I want to thank County Executive Frank Wright. He lived the life I'd hoped to live. He started off as a laborer. He helped build the Royal Stadium. As a player, he's one of the best to ever play there. And now he's a county executive in Jackson County, resident and a business as well. You know, I mean, this guy's done it all. Under the leadership of mayors like, our mayor here. Now, today, the average price you're paid here in Kansas City is below $2 a gallon, $3 a gallon. It's down to $2.90 a gallon. 20% down from a month ago. Nationally, prices are down 7 cents a gallon and continue to fall. You know, the fact is that you're looking at Mr. Amtrak here. I've traveled over, this is God's truth, I've traveled over 1,250,000 miles on Amtrak. Everybody thought that, anyway, because I went home every single night after my wife and daughter were killed because I couldn't afford a home in Delaware and in Washington. So I commuted every day. I remember one day, as vice president, the government keeps fastidious records of how many miles you travel on government planes. And so there's a big headline. Biden travels, I forget it was, 1 million miles on Air Force Two and so on and so forth. In the states as well as nationally. Because look, as usual, you ask always the best question. And you asked me about whether or not we were going to be able to, what we're going to do about it, how we're going to handle this. And part of it is acknowledging that the likelihood of fewer weather catastrophes, absent a continued movement on dealing with global warming, is just not going to happen. Not going to happen. Well, it's not going to increase inflation. It'll diminish inflation. It has a negative impact on inflation. It doesn't raise inflation. But that's hard for people to think about right now because inflation is up and there's a direct correlation in most people's mind. Well, why is inflation? Well, government's spending money. Well, that's not the reason for the inflation. The reason for the inflation is that we have a supply chain problem that is really severe, and it's causing a significant increase in prices. The downside is prices have gone up because of supply chain concerns. We've worked as hard on the supply chain concerns. I think you're going to see, you've already begun to see, and you're going to see over the next couple months, oil prices, prices of a gas pump come down. You know, the biggest, a third of the increase in inflation is used automobiles. So, I mean, it is a real problem. But the point is that has to do with supply chain as well. But it also has to do with the fact that not everybody's looking for a used automobile, but those who are, they're paying higher prices because there's fewer of them because of COVID and what was sold out and the like. So I think it's it really is, it's a real bump in the road. It does affect families. When you walk in the grocery store and you're paying more for whatever you're purchasing, it matters. It matters to people. When you're paying more for gas.
Well, you mentioned the word inflation there. You recently said you have no short-term answer to bring down gas prices. But as you know, it's not just gas prices now. Rents are up. The cost of everyday items are up. Inflation in the U.S. is at a 13-year high. So when specifically should Americans expect those prices to come down?
Well, look, first of all, the significant reason why prices are up is because of COVID affecting the supply chain. I mean, I know you, I'm not trying to be instructive. I know you know this, number one. Number two, if you take a look at, gas prices and you take a look at oil prices, that is a consequence of, thus far, the refusal of Russia or the OPEC nations to pump more oil. And we'll see what happens on that score sooner than later. Number three, I think if you take a look at what we're talking about, you look to this coming Thanksgiving. We're in a situation where we find that we are in a very different circumstance. Last Thanksgiving, as I said, this year we're working on supply chain issues. Well, last Thanksgiving, I sat down with my wife, my daughter, and my son-in-law. This Thanksgiving, we're all in a very different circumstance. Things are a hell of a lot better, and the wages have gone up higher, faster than inflation, and we have generated. If you take a look at what economy is growing, the United States is growing. It has problems, mainly because of COVID and supply chain. He thinks that he's worried about this being inflationary or going to be negative impact in the economy. I think that I've made it clear to Joe, and will continue to, and we will, that as I've apologized for repeating it, Peter, but 17 Nobel laureates on economics said it's going to lower inflation, raise wages, increase competition. Nancy, CBS. I think you had your hand up. I'm sorry. Did you?
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Jen Epstein, Wall Street Journal. Excuse me. I beg your pardon.
Bloomberg.
I hope I got it. I got it.
Thank you.
Especially since my granddaughter works for you guys in a different circumstance. So I got it. I'm in trouble.
Well, I'm going to ask a very Bloomberg question.
Okay. I called on the Wall Street Journal, Catherine. I got the wrong one. Sorry. Let's try the real Wall Street Journal.
Thank you very much. We are the real Wall Street Journal. Mr. President, you tweeted earlier asking Virginia and New Jersey residents to vote. Democrat Terry McAuliffe is struggling in a state that you won by 10 points. Do you see his problems as a rebuke of your presidency? And could this signal your real losses for Democrats in the midterms?
We're going to win. I think we're going to win in Virginia. And you're reporting it being close. But the fact that China, trying to assert, understandably, a new role in the world as a world leader, not showing up, come on. The single most important thing that's gotten the attention of the world is climate. Everywhere. From Iceland to Australia, it just is a gigantic issue. And they've walked away. How do you do that and claim to be able to have any leadership mantle. The same with Putin and Russia. You know,
how much responsibility do you take for the dismal results in Virginia and beyond?
And remember that we all have an obligation to accept the legitimacy of these elections. I was talking to Terry to congratulate him today. He got 600,000 more votes than any Democrat ever has gotten. We brought out every Democrat about there was, more votes than ever has been cast for a Democratic incumbent. I'm not incumbent, a Democrat running for governor. And no governor in Virginia has ever won when he's of the same or he or she's the same party as the sitting president. This ought to be good.
I think so too. About the way forward, Mr. President, as you were leaving for your overseas trip, there were reports that were surfacing that your administration is planning to pay illegal immigrants who are separated from their families at the border up to $450,000 each, possibly $1 million per family. Do you think that that might incentivize more people to come over illegally?
If you guys keep sending that garbage out, yeah, but it's not true.
So this is a garbage report?
Yeah.
Okay. So
$450,000 per person. Is that what you're saying?
That was separated from a family member at the border under the last administration.
That's not going to happen. And all the things I have and what I've been pushing in legislation, each of the elements are overwhelmingly popular. We have to speak to them, though. We have to speak to them and explain them. Look, I just think people are at a point, and it's understandable, where there's a whole lot of confusion. People are upset and uncertain about a lot of things, from COVID to school to jobs to a whole range of things, and the cost of a gallon of gasoline. We've already sent millions of doses, millions of doses at approximately, I beg your pardon, I swallowed wrong. Many of the vaccine sites will offer after work and after school.
Ted, do you take some responsibility, and do you think that Terry McAuliffe would have won if your agenda had passed before Election Day?
Well, I think we should have passed before Election Day, but I'm not sure that I would be able to have changed the number of very conservative folks who turned out in the red districts who were Trump voters, but maybe.
State by 10 points, Mr. President.
No, I know we did, but I was running against Donald Trump.
When you went to try to help Terry McAuliffe a couple weeks ago before you left, you mentioned Trump 24 times. Do you still think that voters really want to hear you talking about Trump more than the issues affecting them every day?
Well, the reason I mentioned Trump, if I didn't count the times, is because the issues he supports are affecting their lives every day, and they're a negative impact on their lives, in my view. Thank you all very much. You know, they'll get tax breaks, and genuine tax breaks. If that's Trump, to tell him I'm busy. Bad joke, but anyway. But the point is that we have to move and make it clear that what we've done is increasing their look. People need a little breathing room. Let's get this done. I'll be back to answer some of your questions when they pass. But may God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Without a CBO score, the House should vote, sir?
Did you speak to Jay Powell yesterday, sir?
Not only are more Americans working Americans are seeing their paychecks go up. Weekly pay went up in October, with an average hourly earnings up almost 5% this year. That's more than some of the lowest paid workers in our country, men and women who work in restaurants, hotels, the entertainment industry, have seen their pay go up 12% this year. Over 5.5 million jobs. Unemployment down a record pace to 4.6%. And before we passed the rescue plan, forecasters said it would take to the end of 2023 to get to 4.6 unemployment rate. Today, we've reached that rate 2 years before forecasters thought it was possible. I would humbly suggest this is a significant improvement from when I took office, and a sign that we're on the right track. This did not happen by accident or just because. We're the fastest growing major economy, and one creating jobs at a faster pace than anyone. Yet, yes, there's a lot more to be done. We still have to tackle the costs that American families are facing. But this recovery is faster, stronger, and fairer and wider than almost anyone could have predicted. That's what the numbers say. Those of you who have kids in school, when we've been going this hybrid thing, some in class, some out of class, how many times, if you don't live in an area where you have high-speed internet you can afford, how many times you've driven your kids to the parking lot of McDonald's and sat there going off the McDonald's internet so you could hear? No, I'm not joking. For higher prices, and people are feeling it. They're feeling it. So ever think you'd be paying this much for a gallon of gas? In some parts of California, they're paying $4.50 a gallon.
On this audio inflation, you mentioned unchecked inflation.
There's nobody suggesting there's unchecked inflation on the way. No serious economist. We also know that as our economy has come roaring back, we've seen some price increases. Some folks have raised worries that this could be a sign of persistent inflation, but that's not our view. Our experts believe, and the data shows, that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary. Now, I want to be clear. My administration understands that if we were to ever experience unchecked inflation over the long term, that would pose a real challenge to our economy. But consumer prices remain too high. Tell us, the American people, in the midst of this economic crisis, the recovery is showing strong results, but not to them. They're still looking out there. Everything from a gallon of gas to a loaf of bread costs more, and it's worrisome, even though wages are going up. Jobs are up, wages are up, values are up, and savings are up. But we got problems too. Many people remain unsettled about the economy, and we all know why. They see higher prices. They go to the store online, or they go to the store or go online, and they can't find what they always want, and when they want it. If you make less than $400,000, you're not going to pay anything more in taxes at all, period. Guarantee, including gasoline tax, not going to additional from a federal government standpoint. But as we continue to overcome these obstacles, the more price pressures will ease. But I have not been content to sit back and wait. I've used every tool available to address the price increases, and it's working. Take gas prices. Last week, I announced the largest ever release from the United States Strategic Petroleum Reserve to increase the supply of oil and help bring down prices. The fact is, the Build Back Better plan is fiscally responsible. It's the first major piece of legislation in more than a decade that is not only fully paid for, but will generate more than $100 billion in deficit reduction. So, let's take a step back and take stock of where our economy is. Wages are up. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, we've delivered significant tax cuts for families raising kids. Tax cuts and rising wages for middle-class families mean the Americans, on average, have about $100 more in their pockets every month than they did last year. About $350 more each month than they did before the pandemic, even after accounting for inflation. Let me repeat that. Even after accounting for rising prices, the typical American family has more money in their pockets than they did last year or the year before that. Higher wages and more disposable income. Fewer children in poverty. Fewer people getting unemployment checks. None of this was inevitable. It was because of the American Rescue Plan, which virtually every Democrat in Congress voted for and every Republican voted against. In fact, a new independent analysis released today showed that my Build Back Better plan would mean $7,400 in tax cuts and savings for the typical family with 4 kids, the typical family of 4 with 2 kids. In fact, they will, quote, take the edge off of inflation. Now my Republican friends are talking a lot about prices, but they're lined up against my Build Back Better plan, which would go right at the problem for rising costs for families. Why is that? I don't want to speculate on anyone's motive, but it's always easier to complain about a problem than to try to fix it. But my mask.
Oh, boy. I don't need a mask outside.
Guess I don't.
This is me. Yeah, we're right here.
I want to thank everyone who helped make this happen. Vice President Harris, my cabinet members, my White House team, Jill, Doug, our First Lady, and our First Lady and our Second husband. No, I'm joking. These guys travel all over the country together. I'm getting worried, you know. And Doug's one hell of a lawyer besides. And no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a single penny in federal taxes.
I never imagined in a million years that I would be standing here today. Yeah. But that's what's great about America. Thank you. Thank you.
Heather, you thought you're surprised you're standing here. Jill is very surprised I'm standing here. Senator Rob Portman is a really hell of a good guy. I'm not hurting you, Rob, because I know you're not running again. That's the only reason I say it. But you are a hell of a good guy. And the most determined woman I know, Senator Kristen Sinema. Congratulations, Kristen. Great jobs laying down those broadband lines. No parent. Excuse me, no parent. With holidays coming, but by the way, all sit down, man, if you have a seat. I'm not used to being president. Everybody's standing. I'm sorry. This truck, 3 times heavier. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. $4,500 for union-made vehicles. 20 years in which American infrastructure, first time in 20 years. We're going to, one more thing. It's fully paid for. Fully paid. It does not increase the deficit 1 single cent. Know the little expression, time is money. As one computer said, if you're on the train and they say Portal Bridge, you know you better make other plans. You hear these numbers, 3.5 trillion or 1.75 trillion? We pay for it all. It doesn't increase the deficit 1 single cent. You know, when you're president, you see all these people here? They're with you all the time. They get to ask you all kinds of questions, and you try to figure out how you can avoid answering them sometimes. See this man here? He's the governor of the state. He runs the state. And this is his wife who runs him and me and everybody else. 63 miles a day on Amtrak. And then one of the senior guys on Amtrak, Angelo Negri. I got to know all the conductors really well. They became my friends. And Ange walks up to me and goes, "Joey, baby!" Grabs my cheek, and I thought the Secret Service was going to blow his head off. I said, I swear to God, true story.
Big problems in the United States for supply chains is not having enough workers, not enough people to drive trucks to unload at ports, for example, and a lot of other parts in the supply chain. Workers have not returned to the labor force in America as fast as your administration thought they would. Why do you think that is? Why aren't
Because they're able to negotiate for higher wages and they move from one job to another. That's one of the reasons why. A lot of people don't want to continue to do the job they did before, making $7, $8, $9 an hour. An awful lot of the truck drivers are not unionized truck drivers. They're working like hell and not getting paid a whole lot. And so what you're seeing here is a combination of the desire of people to be able to change professions, to be able to do more and take care of their families, and at the same time dealing with an issue that, in fact, we are short of workers, but worker pay has actually gone up. So it's not, people, understandably, well, it started off at 6 trillion, now it's 3.5 trillion, now is it going to be 2.9? It's going to be zero. Zero, because in that plan that I put forward, and I said from the outset, I said, I'm running to change the dynamic of how the economy grows. I'm tired of trickle down. The trillionaires and billionaires are doing very, very well. There is no easy way to end that. There's a lot, I'm sure, along the line that there are things I could have done better, but I make no apologies for my proposals, how I'm proceeding.
British Prime Minister in the American Oval Office called on British reporters, and then when American reporters tried to call on the American president, we were escorted out, let's put it that way.
Well, I think in that circumstance, and I think our relationship with the United Kingdom and with Prime Minister Johnson is so strong and abiding, we will be able to move forward beyond this. But he called on individuals from his press corps without alerting us to that intention in advance.
Of course, that's the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. That's the. I think that's
The United States will champion the democratic values that go to the very heart of who we are as a nation and a people. Freedom, equality, opportunity, and a belief in the universal rights of all people. It's stamped into our DNA as a nation, and critically, it's stamped into the DNA of this institution, the United States.
What is your message to America's partners around the world who have criticized not the withdrawal, but the conduct of that withdrawal and made them question America's credibility on the world stage?
I have seen no question of our credibility from our allies around the world. I've spoken with our NATO allies. We've spoken with NATO allies, the Secretary of State. Our national security advisor has been in contact with his counterparts throughout the world and our allies, as has the general, I keep calling him a general, but my Secretary of Defense. The fact of the matter is, I have not seen that. Matter of fact, the exact opposite I've gotten. The exact opposite thing is we're acting with dispatch. We're acting committing to what we said we would do. Look.
But will you sign off on sending U.S. troops into Kabul to evacuate Americans who haven't been able to get to the airport safely?
We have no indication that they haven't been able to get in Kabul through the airport. We've made an agreement with the Taliban thus far. They've allowed them to go through. It's in their interest for them to go through. So we know of no circumstance where American citizens are carrying an American passport or trying to get through to the airport. That's why, by the way, it happens to be in Asia for me right now, but that's why we have a female vice president of the United States of America we're going to have some presidents pretty soon.
A question on the public response. A new poll out today shows Americans wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan, but they disapprove of the way you've handled it. The poll also found that based in part on what's transpired in the last week, a majority of Americans, and forgive me, I'm just the messenger, no longer consider you to be competent, focused, or effective in the job.
I haven't seen that poll.
It's out there from CBS this morning. What would you say?
Let me be clear. The evacuation of thousands of people from Kabul is going to be hard and painful, no matter when it started, when we began. It would have been true if we had started a month ago or a month from now. There is no way to evacuate this many people without pain and loss of heartbreaking images you see on television. It's just a fact. I can't think of anyone better to lead this operation than Deanne Criswell of FEMA. Wait. Let me take the one question from the most interesting guy that I know in the press. That's you. I'll take a few more questions, but you, sir.
I wanted to ask you,
that's okay.
You say that...
They gave me a list here. The first person I was instructed to call on was Kelly O'Donnell of NBC.
You said the buck stops with you. Do you bear any responsibility for the way that things have unfolded in the last 2 weeks?
I bear responsibility for fundamentally all that's happened of late. But here's the deal. You know, I wish you'd one day say these things. You know as well as I do that the former president made a deal with the Taliban that he would get all American forces out of Afghanistan by May 1. No, I'm asking you a question. Because before... No, wait a minute. I'm asking you a question. Is that accurate, to the best of your knowledge? What?
I don't think that do you think that people have an issue with pulling out of Afghanistan or just the way that things have happened?
I think they have an issue that people.
Afghanistan.
I'm not going to answer any more question on Afghanistan. Look, it's 4th of July. I'm concerned that you guys are asking me questions that I'll answer next week, but this is a holiday weekend. I'm going to celebrate it. There's great things happening.
Mr. President, will you amplify that question, please? Will you amplify your answer, please, why you don't trust the Taliban?
It's a silly question. Do I trust the Taliban? No. But I trust the capacity of the Afghan military, who is better trained, better equipped, and more competent in terms of conducting war.
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
What is the level of confidence that they have that it will not collapse?
The Afghan government and leadership has to come together. They clearly have the capacity to sustain the government in place. The question is, will they generate the kind of cohesion to do it? It's not a question of whether they have the capacity. They have the capacity. They have the forces. They have the equipment.
Some Vietnamese veterans see echoes of their experience in this withdrawal in Afghanistan. Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling...
None whatsoever. Zero. What you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. I'd like to, the Attorney General is here. General Garland, Javier, Mr. Secretary, you can come up too. I've been watching on television. You've been really good. Gina Raimondo. Wondered how I did this with a shorter name. First woman chancellor in German history. The first chancellor from the former East Germany. And now the second largest, longest serving chancellor since Helmut Kohl. That's all. I thought I said we'd take 2 questions, but I guess that translator would take 2 questions or more from each person called on. If you have a child under the age of 7 years old, you're going to get in your bank account today, you're going to get a payment of 12 months divided, $3,700 for that child divided by 12 every month, just like a Social Security check. To unite our efforts to upend and on our global climate ambitions, that we have to up the ante. What happened is we talked about when Paris Accord was set, we thought we had established just how serious it was, but things have gotten much more dire since even that date. And to unite our efforts to up the ante on global climate ambitions. We also know that as our economy has come roaring back, we've seen some price increases. Some folks have raised worries that this could be a sign of persistent inflation. But that's not our view. Our experts believe, and the data shows, that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary. I want to be clear. My administration understands that if we were to ever experience unchecked inflation over the long term, that would pose a real challenge to our economy. So while we're confident that isn't what we're seeing today, we're going to remain vigilant. The first part of the question was?
It was on inflation. You mentioned unchecked inflation.
There's nobody suggesting there's unchecked inflation on the way. No serious economist. That's totally different. I mean, look, the stock market is higher than it has been in all of history, even when it's down this month. Even down this month. Now, I don't look at the stock market as a means by which to judge the economy like my predecessor did. But he'd be talking to you every day for the last 5 months about how the stock market is so high, higher than any time in history, still higher than any time in history. So that's not how I judge whether or not. I believe where we're headed. Before I took office, there were a lot of folks out there making some pretty bold predictions about how things would turn out. You might remember some of the predictions that if I became president, we'd, quote, see a depression, the likes of which we've never seen, end of quote. Well, it's true that the economy was sputtering before I got here, adding only 60,000 jobs per month or for 3 months before I was sworn in. But now, 6 months later, we've changed that. Back in 2009, during the so-called Great Recession, the president asked me to be in charge of managing that piece, then President Trump. Excuse me, Freudian slip. That was the last president. He caused, anyway, that was President Obama when I was vice president. And the American auto industry, remember, was on the rocks. The jobs that are going to be created here. Remember, you were asking me, and I'm not being critical of you all, I really mean this. It was legitimate questions you're asking me. Asking me, well, you know, guess what? Employers can't find workers. I said, yeah, pay them more. This is an employees bargaining chip now. And you said when people are waiting for relief, I got them $1.9 trillion of relief so far. They're going to be getting checks in the mail that are consequential this week for childcare. Talk of inflation. The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down. No one's talking about this great, you know,